Well, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have a global audience as usual, so it's afternoon on the West Coast all the way through the East Coast. It's early evening over in Europe, and it's very early morning over in Asia. So thanks for joining us for our the next MSP Tech Talk. So if you're new, a couple of things to give you some context, then a little bit of housekeeping. So MSP Tech Talk, we're deep into our second year with this academic format. And what that is every quarter, just like a college with a quarter system, we have 6 lectures that are academic in nature. And what allows us to be on the air is the generous support of our community sponsors. So shout out today to EFolder, we're going to hear from. Intermedia, we're going to hear from. We're also supported by SolarWinds. So if it weren't for them, we wouldn't be here. A couple of things that are coming up. I had a chance to see a couple of you earlier this week down in Vancouver, Washington, just outside Portland, for the CMIT Elevate conference. And what was interesting about that, and at your leisure, click on over to CMIT and get to know them, but they are the largest IT franchise organization in the U.S. And they had their annual conference in Vancouver, Washington, which is a surprisingly delightful town and much, much cheaper than Portland if I ever found myself living in that region. And they were focusing on security and managed services security provider paradigm. So that was interesting to me. I will be looking forward to seeing people. The next show that I officially have confirmed on the books will be the CompTIA event in Washington, D.C., late July, early August. We'll be there in the booth. So I look forward to seeing you there, and we have a couple more tech talks to knock out. Speaking of which, use the questions feature to ask all of your questions, and I will relay those to today's speaker, Steve Looper, and then check the handout section for some downloads pertaining to the topic and also our sponsors. And with that said, our guest today is an expert with the partner program and Azure. So Steve Looper, let me turn the talking stick over to you, sir. These people are ready to get going. Please introduce yourself, and then when we get to the next slide, I have a couple questions for you.
Okay, sure. Sounds good. Thanks for having me today. I am a Seattle-based cloud solution architect working with partners in general and CSP and MSP partners specifically around Azure. The team I sit on is an infrastructure-focused team, and we have sibling teams who deal with other things like modern workplace, data and AI, and more on the application side. So Harry, I appreciate you including me today, and more than happy to answer any questions that you have to get us going.
Well, just on a personal note, because everybody on this call, we're all, business owners and entrepreneurs, and we'd like to have a little bit of fun with Tech Talk. So tell us about if you don't mind, tell us about the latest investment that you and your wife have made. Give yourself a shout out. It's pretty cool.
Oh, too funny. Yeah, so my wife, who has worked at Microsoft on and off for the past 10, 12 years, decided that she wanted to start her own business. And she started an escape room in downtown Bellevue, Washington called Reality Break Escapes. And it's been open for about 2 weeks as of today. So thanks for that, Harry. And anybody who's in the Seattle or Bellevue area, she'd love to have you come visit.
And Brenda's well known in the SMB Nation community over the years. So, all right, let's rock. Let's jump into the good stuff.
Okay. What's top of mind for you?
Well, what I'd like to talk about is you hear about all of these as a services. I'm not going to read that acronym, by the way. There's women and children on the line. So let's just say many as a services is in plural. Boy, ooh, I don't even know if you could have a vanity license plate that has that acronym, my friend. So tell me about the differences between infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service, or I, P, and S.
Sure,
qualify
and
as a
I'm not
service.
afraid, Harry. I'm going in here, right? So I call them the as's, and I can be careful when I say that because we
Okay.
have for a number of years here had infrastructure as a service and software as a service, and more recently platform as a service, and we'll talk about it a little bit later in the discussion today. But more and more things are becoming available kind of as a service. But a lot of people aren't really clear on the differences between infrastructure platform and software as a service. So I thought it would be useful to just spend a minute or two talking about that. What we're most familiar with is likely the infrastructure as a service. And that's, if you look at the blue kind of at the bottom, that's what you're, I guess I would say, giving up control or abstracting, as compared to the far left side with traditional on-premises solutions, where you, the end customer, are responsible for managing everything from the physical network switches to storage and electricity and so on. But when you go to infrastructure as a service and somebody like a cloud provider like Azure, then you abstract having to deal with networking and storage and the physical servers and the hypervisor or the virtualization layer, but you retain responsibility for the operating system and anything that runs on top of the operating system, including your applications and then the data that sits inside those applications. And that's not all that new to us because people have been virtualizing for a decade or more, but now we've given up the blue. We give that responsibility to the cloud provider, somebody like an Azure. But then platform as a service, that's a little newer, and we still rely on the cloud provider for the four bottom blue things. But then in addition to that, we also look to the cloud provider to deal with the operating system, and in many cases, some of the applications running on that operating system, but not necessarily the end user application. The end user or end customer still has responsibility for their application and always has responsibility for their data and controlling access to the application through users and that kind of thing. And then finally, on the far right is software as a service, which has been around for a long time. And this is where you use a client application or a browser and rely on the vendor to provide everything. And some examples of these, so infrastructure as a service, of course, Azure and AWS or Amazon Web Services and a couple others there. Platform as a service, there are people like Google App Engine and Salesforce who provide platform as a service offers in addition to Azure, of course. And software as a service, the one that the folks on today's call are probably most familiar with, is going to be something like an Office 365. But again, that could be Outlook.com, Windows Update, Xbox Live, and of course, Salesforce. So that's kind of how I think about those different as's, Harry. And you want to
Yeah.
see a fun example that kind of makes it real?
Okay.
How about pizza as a service? So in 2014, a gentleman from IBM posted an article with this slide on it on LinkedIn. And to make it real, he said, okay, take a look at this. And the green in his example is what the vendor manages. And the blue in this slide or this example is what you're responsible for. So it's a really good comparison, a good way to make it real, to compare IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS with pizza as a service.
Well, I was going to ask on your prior. Stay here though, because the top part of the slide has the categories. But my question was which is the. It doesn't sound quite right, but which is the biggest of the different services, and then we can decide which is the biggest in terms of pizza.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say SaaS is likely the most prevalent because there are thousands and thousands of SaaS applications out there. If you think about a small business, you can buy everything from HR to payroll to scheduling and on and on and on and on as a service. So those are typically SaaS offerings, though our opportunities as MSPs are probably much less or much lighter around SaaS. But then from both a revenue and an opportunity standpoint, IaaS is definitely the biggest. As a matter of fact, it's gigantic, and it's growing. It's from an Azure standpoint, almost 3/4 of our revenue comes from IaaS based workloads. And I'll talk about it on the next slide. But when we say IaaS, we're really talking about things like virtual machines and storage. But Gartner last year said that by 2020, I can't even read these numbers. They said that there would be some huge millions of dollars in the public cloud in the coming couple of years.
Well, we have a question. So before we get too far afield, we have Ken Schaefer out of Portland, Oregon. So, by the way, Ken, I regret not looking you up. My visit was pretty quick down to Vancouver, Washington again. So please forgive me, but Ken Schaefer runs a long-standing SMB partner group. And Ken is asking tongue-in-cheek, but it's a valid point on your prior slide. So moving left to right, we have the MSP elimination strategy. And Steve, what I think Ken is really asking, and maybe you can address it, is the concerns of partners in the new world. And I know you get that all the time.
Yeah, I think we'll leave the pizza slide up maybe because then we're not talking about eliminating MSPs, we're talking about eliminating Pizza Hut and Domino's. But Ken, I appreciate the question, and I've been at Microsoft a long time, and I've been in the partner space the majority of that time. I hope that we never look to or are perceived as eliminating partners or eliminating MSPs. But I would agree with you that there's always a need to evolve. If you say that we're all about deploying Windows on the desktop and installing servers for customers on-prem, you should probably find something different to be doing. But I would think that if you look at your business over the last 10 years or 15 years, it certainly has evolved from physical and on-prem to virtual. And then if we think about, I don't know, 8 to 10 years ago, we kind of stopped deploying email servers on behalf of customers and started moving those kinds of things to the cloud. So it's really about evolving yourself as a partner and the kinds of value that you add to your customers. And then just thinking about MSP, we saw this slide a second ago, and I'll go back to it, that talks about how gigantic IaaS is. Somebody still has to do the important things on all of those IaaS resources. We've got virtual machines, we've got storage, we've even got, and we'll talk about it in a minute, we've even got what I would consider PaaS offers that don't take care of themselves, that require somebody with expertise to scale that across a number of customers. So it's really about evolving your business to the kinds of services that you provide that offer value to your customers, and be differentiating yourselves from everybody else on the call today or your neighbor who's also an MSP, and figuring out where you can offer some unique value to your customers. If you're in the transactional business and saying, oh, I'm just selling Office licenses, or in my case, I'm just reselling Azure through CSP and making a couple point markup from what Microsoft sells Azure to me, I don't think that's a good long-term strategy. Just straight transactional margin when every cloud provider is bringing prices down and down and down and down. Yep. You've got to be in a place where you can provide value and add the actual add actual managed services to what you're selling from the cloud providers.
Hey, Steve, two things. Go back a couple slides to the original lineup of the as a services.
Sure.
One before pizza.
Yep.
Prior to that, there we go. We have David Wolf wanted to see that slide. We'll leave that up for a second. Ken comes back at us to say that I still have customers requesting on-prem Exchange servers. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I don't doubt that, Ken. I don't doubt that. I suspect that in the coming years, I don't know what the number is. Is it 3, 5, 10? I don't know, but we will continue to see fewer and fewer customers making those requests. So glad that there's an opportunity for you and an opportunity for us selling that Exchange license. But I would argue if you look at today versus 5 years ago versus 10 years ago, that line is going down to the right.
There we go. And folks, if you joined late, so we're talking Azure, we're talking partners, and we're talking with Steve Looper today, who's an expert in both. And then, Steve, after we have a little context and we'll have an EFolder moment, just to set the table, but I believe we're gonna truly get to the good stuff that this crowd likes, which would be the demos, the hands-on demos. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I've got a couple things I'd love to share this audience. Absolutely.
Okay, well let's continue. I think we've left the original slide up for enough. If you, Steve, talking stick back to you, my friend.
Yeah, really the only other thing that I wanted to share just about Azure from a slide standpoint, and I don't want to be that guy who's on a call for a long time with nothing but slides. So the other thing I wanted to share is really just the global nature of Azure. I've heard a lot of partners, whether they're in a Portland or a Dayton, Ohio, or pick your small city on the East Coast. Say, okay, I get it. Azure's big and Azure's everywhere. Um, but my customer's only in one place where I take care of them, and does it matter to me that Azure's big and global and whatnot? And my thoughts are the customer in Portland would prefer his data to be closer to him than the customer in Dayton. So even to you, it should matter that Microsoft does have a pretty sizable footprint in our data centers and in Azure. And second is, as we all know from having been in the business, hardware is hardware and software is software, and sometimes things, let's use a gentle word, hiccup. And when that happens, you'd like there to be another place where your customers could have their data or keep their applications running. And that's why a distributed global infrastructure is able to help even small customers who say, hey, I'm in Dayton, Ohio, I just want to put my stuff in North Central US or East US or something like that. But then if there's a problem with Azure, with our data centers, they want a fallback plan and they want to be able to keep their stuff running. So having high availability that exists somewhere in the Western US probably makes good sense for them. And I just put this slide up for two reasons. One, so that you can see the link at the very bottom that you can go look at this and drill down into it on your own if you'd like to. And two is truly to see the hyperscale nature of Azure, and that Microsoft has the largest footprint in terms of public cloud with 50 regions around the world between what's available today and what's been announced. Those are the kind of dotted lines. And right now you'll notice that most of that is outside the US, in the Gulf, interestingly enough, and in Europe. So Harry, that's mostly what I wanted to share from a slide standpoint. I love hearing the questions and talking to folks about Azure, and I'm more than happy to do as much show and tell as we find ourselves with time for, and happy to take questions.
Okay, well, I wonder if we want to hop into the EFolder presentation. Robert, are you ready, able, and willing?
I am ready and willing. We're going to find out if I'm able, Harry. So we'll give it a shot. Thanks so much for the time today. How's everything going?
Good, good. And folks, just to give the context that a couple people joined late. We have a good audience today. It's a good topic, and the MSP Tech Talk series is like an academic quarter, so winter, spring, summer, fall. And the reason we're here with academic content is we have well-behaved and generous sponsors that allow us to be on the air, and EFolder is one of them. So Robert, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'm gonna kind of paint the picture, because EFolder is a well-known quantity in our community, but there's been some changes over the past couple of years. So, sir, what is your story?
Well, absolutely. And so thank you very much, Harry. And yes, Robert Leek, Director of Marketing. And we have had a really interesting story here at EFolder over the last few years. We've been around in the channel, for 10 to 15 years at this point. It really built a strong solution way back then around the backup product. And it was a solution that we were able to grow with. But at the same time, it also allowed us insights as far as what data protection was going to be for the IT service channel providers. And we saw the needs and an evolution in the marketplace that saw technology changes, that saw changes in how people were doing business. And the strategic leaders that were kind of driving the company forward at the time saw that backup's great, but we're going to need a lot more things. And so we started looking and making very strategic acquisitions and bringing them in to the company to form what we think is one of the, if not the most powerful suite of data protection solutions available to the IT channel. And when I say that, we are very much purpose-built for the IT channel. It's our entire client base, it's who we are, and it's where we've come from. So when we started making those acquisitions, we looked at things like file sync and share, and we have our Anchor solution that kind of fits that mold. And even though it's so much more than file sync and share, I always feel bad calling it just that, because along with the secure abilities to share documents and work in that capacity, it also comes with collaboration tools that again keep it within a secure environment, as well as comes with really file level protection that is able to help your clients manage erroneous deletions, malware attacks, all types of things at that file level. Subsequently, we also saw, obviously we're in the cloud, we're the people behind your cloud, and we need to focus on the cloud. And as it relates to cloud infrastructures, we saw Cloud Finder, that solution there at the bottom left, as a perfect fit for what it was doing with Office 365. So where, there's some potentials for different retention policies as well as margins, Cloud Finder gives you an ability to really staple on an insurance policy with your Office 365 licenses that makes your clients more sticky and provides that added layer of protection that they need for email, contacts, calendar, as well as SharePoint. And then lastly, it's really the business continuity pillar of our business, and it's the one that we've been rounding out here over the last couple of years. We first, invested in Replicate, and then subsequently BRC through Axient last year. And what we've created is really a flexible, reliable, and manageable business continuity option set that allows you to really understand the needs of your clients and be able to provide offerings for them around, whether they need on-site strengths or the ability to go up into the cloud if they have, downtimes of minutes, meaning actual dollars to them. And we feel like what we've put together is a really strong option in the realm of business continuity to provide the types of needs and SLAs to your clients that you need.
Yeah. And then to kind of round out our conversation for today, and we'll see you back here next episode, of course. But a couple of things. One was a lot of people would recall EFolder being based in Atlanta, Georgia, and you had an interesting series of transactions. And I'm going to say, and correct me, I can't remember if that was just a year ago or was that 2 years ago. You did the Axient acquisition, and then that EFolder entity then got acquired. Is that quite the right word? By a private equity firm in Denver, so it relocated from Denver to Atlanta. Quickly, why don't you connect those dots for us? Because a lot of people knew EFolder in Atlanta, right?
Sure. And that's certainly where the strongest roots were. But in actuality, we were a fairly dispersed company, and you were so close, Harry, with the way that you were putting things together, but the timing was a little off. So we actually had some investments on the private equity side. It's still, just an investment side of the business from the portfolio, but with K1 Investments. And that happened about 4 or 5 years or so ago.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, it was a little bit longer than that. So we've been working with them and had a lot of value. And to your point about the Denver, they did see, I think, strength in, kind of a formal headquarters. And so that's what we've put in place here in Denver, Colorado. That's what allowed me to join the organization and really opened the door for me to get back into the channel. I've actually been, in technology myself for close to 20 years, working in telecom and the reseller channels and things of that nature. But back into the IT channel with EFolder as we opened the doors here last year early, and then subsequently in July of 2017 is when we finalized the acquisition of Axient.
Okay, and what's the name of your CEO? Because he's a known quantity in the community, and I believe we're going to talk to him in a few weeks.
Yes, Matt Nogtrop, and we're definitely going to have him join the Tech Talk series. He's been in the channel for close to 20 years now. So many of them know him from his fame with ConnectWise and the Lab Tech product that kind of came together with that union. But even prior to that, he opened his own MSP in Toledo, Ohio in 1999. So his experience and his breadth of knowledge within the channel as well as solution providers really, I learn something from him new every day.
All right. Well, Robert, thanks for joining us. Hang out if you can. By the way, you're free to ask questions using the question feature. We do have some questions lining up, and then Let's see. Ken, I'm gonna back into a couple of your comments after 1 p.m. I'm catching what you're pitching, but one that's specific. So Steve, if you want to take the talking stick again, we're ready to return to the academic presentation. We have Ken asking a question. Are there any data centers located within Portland for Azure?
Yeah, thanks for the question. The slide that I showed, and I'm happy to go back to it if you want, or you can go to that website, generally speaking, is the information that we give about our data centers. So we generally give information in the context of regions. So for example, if you look here, we've got West US and West US 2 that we know are in the west/northwest part of the US. But for the most part, we don't advertise the specific location or addresses of data centers. And it's also worth noting that our regions are always 2 or more data centers, and frequently even more than that. We have 100 and I don't know how many, 100, I would say probably in the 100 to 200 range of individual data centers. And it's sort of common knowledge that there's some in the Quincy, Washington area, just because that's a flagship area that we like to take people who are visiting Redmond for tours. But they're all over the world, and can I give you an exact answer? Is there one in the Portland area, and what's the address? No, I don't really have that, and if so, probably wouldn't be allowed to share it.
Okay. No problem. And hey, Jenny, if you could forward Art Bigler's question over to Robert Leake at EFolder. Robert has gone back to his desk job as he should, and Art, I see your question. We'll have it forwarded and get that answered for you. So demos, now the good stuff. And boy, our crowd never met a demo they didn't like. Let me tell you, Steve.
Yeah. So let me show you. I have a couple different angles I'm intending to share with you in terms of demos, and let me just make sure it didn't log me out here. Yes, in fact, it did.
Well,
are you seeing my screen?
Pay your bill. Yeah, you got to pay your bill, brother, before you go on the air.
Yeah, exactly. You're seeing my screen okay, though?
We're the dashboard. Yep.
Okay, very good. So the first thing I wanted to just give a quick look at is the Partner Center, and I suspect that many of the people on the call today are familiar with partnercenter.microsoft.com and its various incarnations and iterations over the last, I don't know, couple years. This is where you go as a CSP, so an MSP who's transacting through Microsoft. This is where you go to see who your customers are and sell stuff to them. So for example, if I wanted to go see what is available to sell to my customers, I can go into sell, and then I can go into pricing and offers. And I just want to call out a couple real quick things here, and then I will get into the technical actual Azure stuff in a moment. Our pricing is available to you if you're already a CSP. Right here on the Partner Center dashboard, you can download the current license-based services. So this is going to be things like Office 365, Dynamics 365, and so on. Or we're talking about Azure today, so you can download the current CSP pricing for the usage-based services, so all of the Azure stuff. And there's also a great link if you haven't used this. There's an Azure in CSP Pricing Calculator, and I have that open. Again, if it hasn't logged me out yet, look at that. I have a pricing calculator that I want you to, if you haven't used, I want to make you aware of, and I'd love it if you'd take a look at it when you have a chance. If you're building out a solution for a customer and selling them some Azure in addition to your services, this is a great place to go. Well, there you go. This is a great place to go to say, well, I need this many virtual machines of this particular size, and I need storage. Or if you're doing some of the PaaS stuff, you could look at Azure SQL Database or web apps or whatnot. So I'm not going to demo this so much. I just wanted to make sure you're aware of it and you have access to it. And by the way, there is a non-channel version of this. So if you just go to azure.com and then go to pricing, you can see you can build out your own solution either as a partner or as a customer and see the retail pricing that's available there. But from Partner Center, that's the one thing I wanted to show you is pricing and offers. And the second thing I wanted to show you is, if you haven't seen it, you can go into customers, and this is where you can create a brand new customer, or if you're like me and you already have a customer, you can go in and click on that customer and you'll see all of the subscriptions that customer is transacting through you as a CSP, whether it's Azure, Office 365, Windows, or so on, and we separate those by license-based as well as usage-based. So here I've got this one customer I've sold 2 subscriptions to, 2 Azure subscriptions to, and we set a $25 monthly budget for the one subscription, and they're exceeding it significantly. They've used about $28 of Azure at this point. And then I wanted to show you one more thing before we leave the Partner Center and go into the Azure portal, is this Service Management tab. And again, if you're familiar with Office 365, you may have seen this. But when you're in a particular customer and you go into the Service Management tab, then you can pick which of the services of the customers you want to manage. And for example, I can click on the Azure Management portal, which is going to take me to the Azure portal, logged in as myself, as the employee working for an MSP, but I'll be accessing the Azure subscription of the customer. So here you can see I'm logged in as a test user, and the directory that I'm accessing is customers directory, and then all of the resources in these subscriptions are customer resources. So I'm looking at the actual Azure subscription for that customer. Now, to show you some of the Azure stuff, I'm going to go into my
couple questions. Yeah,
go
questions.
Right ahead.
Yeah, they're rolling in. And
okay,
by
perfect.
the way, Ken implores me to clarify he meant Oregon, not Portland. Sorry, Ken. I got Portland on my mind. But Steve, I think your answer still holds, irrespective of whether the geography was Portland or Oregon. I believe you've answered.
Yeah, generally speaking, we don't publicly disclose in great detail the exact city, street, address, whatever of data centers. It's not too hard to figure out if you do some digging, but generally we don't publicize this thing for security reasons.
Okay, Ken goes on to ask, is the pricing listed what we would see from our distributor, or if purchased directly from Microsoft? Actually, a really good question.
It's a great question, and thank you so much for asking the question. What I showed you, or what I am showing you here, presumes that you are what we call a direct CSP and have your own access to Partner Center, and therefore the pricing that you have available is the direct CSP pricing from Microsoft to you. If instead you're what we call an indirect reseller, which means you're working through a distributor, again, we call them an indirect provider, then you're going to have a different experience, because their job is to set the pricing from them to you rather than from Microsoft to you. And your job doesn't really change. Your job is still to set the pricing from yourself to the end customer. But instead of accessing this Partner Center dashboard to create new customers and sell subscriptions to them and that kind of thing, you'll use a portal or a dashboard that's provided by your indirect provider. And I'm not going to name them. There are a number of them. I can point you to a website where you can get the list of them. Harry, I'm happy to share that with you. But then they'll give you an experience as an indirect reseller where you can see the pricing and see your customers and that kind of thing. They provide value to you. Sorry, go ahead, Harry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
The indirect provider provides value to you as a reseller by taking care of the billing on your behalf and being the tier 2 support that you can escalate to.
Next question, Scott Buchanan. Scott, I think you're still down in Florida, and I hope you're still riding. Fellow cyclist, and Steve, as are you.
Yep, very good.
So Scott Buchanan is, and I think I understand the question. how about Microsoft 365, which includes Windows? So I think what he's asking is where's Microsoft 365 on this dashboard that includes Windows, or is it really more granular and broken out? I do see the Windows entry. You want to take that one on?
No. I'm an Azure guy.
Okay.
So sure, there is a catalog available. Again, I'm looking at this from the perspective of a direct CSP, and your experience in your catalog may be different based on what indirect provider you work with if you're not a direct CSP. So I've created my own catalog here, and I can update that based on the offers that are available from Microsoft. And again, I'm an Azure guy, so really I have two things in the catalog that I make available to my salespeople, right? Azure and Azure Active Directory Premium P2. But
Fair
you
enough.
can sell your customers any cloud service that's available through Partner Center. So I can go into my customer and I can say I want to add a subscription, and then it's going to give me a whole list of things that are available to me, both based on my catalog and other offers, which is going to include the Dynamics products. And you can scroll down here and see on and on and on and on. So all the Azure Active Directory SKUs, Dynamics 365, the various cloud services and SKUs there. And I guess we have to scroll down a ways to get to M. I'm going to run out of time
Sure.
before scrolling.
No, fair.
But this is where you
I think
fine, there
this
you
is
go.
where
So
it
these
would
are the
roll.
different
There we go.
Microsoft 365 SKUs that can be available to you to sell.
There we go. That answers Scott's questions.
Great.
Jerry, I'm going to have your question on the back end along with some of Ken's after 1 p.m. So let's go play demo. Let's pick it back up.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. I'm going to go into my own Azure subscription here rather than playing with a customer. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes showing you a couple of the interesting things in the Azure portal. We'll get through a few of them here before 1, and then depending on the questions, we may pick up and see some others after 1 o'clock Pacific time. But I always like to start with the Azure, the dashboard. So if you go to portal.azure.com, that's where you're going to manage everything within a browser. And I'll talk about the non-browser alternatives as well before I wrap up. But that's where you can do everything that you need to do to manage resources inside an Azure subscription. So we've now made a jump from selling stuff to my customers to I've sold an Azure subscription to my customer and I want to be able to deploy resources and manage resources and whatnot. So we do that in portal.azure.com. Now, if you're observant, you may have noticed that mine doesn't say portal.azure.com. It says ms.portal.azure.com because I'm using an internal Microsoft subscription so that I can have access to some preview and beta features. But essentially, it's the same thing. And where you always land when you go to portal.azure.com is you land on the dashboard. And the dashboard is yours. You can customize it, you can create new ones, and I just wanted to give you a quick illustration here. I created one called SMB Nation. I put a couple of my own widgets on here. This is a list of all of the resources currently in this particular Azure subscription. I'm sorry, that's not correct. All of the resources in a particular resource group. And if you're not familiar with resource groups, there's some great Azure training that I can help you find that will help you learn about resources and resource groups and so on. I've got a virtual machine that's running that I deployed inside this subscription using the portal. And if I click on that, then it'll take me right to everything that I can do about that specific virtual machine. So it's showing me on the overview tab, on the overview tab, it's showing me this virtual machine is currently running. See the status here. I can stop it if I click on connect, which I'm not going to do right now. I can RDP to it if it's a Windows virtual machine, which we see here it is, or if it's a Linux VM, I can SSH to it as well. But this overview tab is where you get the basic information about the virtual machine, like what's the CPU utilization been over the last hour or 6 or day or week or whatnot, what's the network traffic been, and so on. And then all of the other configuration that I want to do about this virtual machine, like networking and disks and so on, I can do from within the portal here. And I don't think we actually talked about the slide. I think we skipped a slide, but what I like to talk about when we talk about IaaS is that there's essentially three things that customers buy. It's compute, it's storage, and it's networking. And that's for any cloud provider. And that's what we're looking at here. When we look at VMs, it's you pick the number of vCPUs, you pick the amount of RAM, you pick I don't want to say pick, you design and implement your own networking configuration, and then storage, of course, when you're talking about virtual machines, storage is just disks that are attached to that virtual machine. And this one, I have the default one operating system. We call it a managed disk. That means that you don't have to worry about where it is, and it gives you higher availability. But I could actually click here and I could attach one or two or more data disks as well. So we just went from the dashboard into a specific virtual machine that I had already created, but we could also create a new virtual machine just by clicking on a resource. I'm sorry, clicking on create a resource and then providing all of the details, like do I want a Windows virtual machine, a Linux virtual machine? Do I want it to be just a plain Jane VM with the operating system, or do I want it running SQL Server, or do I want it running a SharePoint farm that's going to be multiple virtual machines? And in this case, I'll just say I want a Windows Server virtual machine. And then I'm not going to go through the exercise, but I have to provide a bunch of configuration information. What do I want to call the virtual machine? Do I want hard disks or solid state disks? Of course, there's a performance and cost difference. So you pick whatever meets your customer's needs, and then I can provide all the logon information, username, password, and so on, and then where I want it located geographically, as well as within resource group, how I want the resources collected that are associated with my virtual machine. And if a customer already owns a Windows license, this is of course in the case of Windows, not in the case of one of the Linux distributions. If a customer already owns a Windows license, they can use their software assurance and decrease the amount that they have to pay for Azure, because the Azure includes the software, the operating system license. So if they've got software assurance with the hybrid use benefit, and you can read more about that by clicking here, then they can decrease what they have to pay for the Azure. And I'm not going to go click through all of these, but the steps are going to take you through picking the size of your virtual machine and any other optional configuration. And then when you get through, you just click OK, and it'll deploy a brand new virtual machine. Just to show you what a couple of those things look like, and then I'll pause.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. We got to go ahead and hit your pause. And I have a couple questions we'll take now, and I'm deferring a couple to after 1 p.m.
Okay, so give me 30 seconds, and then I'll pause for questions. So if I go into a virtual machine, which is where you saw me before, one of the things I didn't show you is that we price the virtual machine based on the resources that you allocate to it. So how many virtual CPUs, how much RAM, what kind of disk, and so on. And the user interface that I'm showing you now is in fact a preview, which is why I'm seeing it, because I pointed out that I'm on that ms.portal.azure.com. But this is what lets you select the virtual machine family and how many virtual CPUs, how much RAM, how many data disks does it support, what's the performance like, right? That's this IOPS, SSD, premium, that's all performance. And then the pricing I'm seeing here is not CSP pricing. Remember, I said that I'm in an internal subscription. So this is what this particular VM would cost. This is probably one of the less expensive ones, would be about $13 a month to leave it running. And then you can scroll till you make yourself crazy, and you see that there are virtual machines that are going to cost you many thousands of dollars a month to leave them running. So Harry, go ahead with your questions.
Okay, and again, just to manage expectations, Ken, Jerry, and Eric, I'll ask many of those questions after one that are of a different nature, but one that's spot on is once again Ken, and Ken is asking, is there anything common between the Azure VM management and the HyperV management? I'm interested in knowing about the two.
Yeah, interesting question. When you talk about is there anything in common between the management, what I think about is the HyperV Manager that you would have running on a Windows machine that talks to the hypervisor, that talks to Hyper-V to start and stop VMs and allocate RAM and that kind of thing. And so when we talk about managing the virtual machine, not really, because Azure is managed through the portal or through a command line or some other tools that I can talk about a little bit later, but not through Hyper-V Manager. But just to extend your question a little tiny bit, is that we of course do use Hyper-V as the hypervisor. So if you have an on-premises virtual machine running in Hyper-V, it's very, very little work to do a lift and shift to pick up the VHD or VHDs that you have running in Hyper-V and drop them into Azure and assign the appropriate CPU and RAM and whatnot. So management is pretty different in Azure versus an on-prem virtual machine, but the concepts are pretty much the same. So if you're familiar with it, you'll be able to translate your knowledge very easily, but you will be using different tools.
Cool. You've answered Ken's question. Thank you. So let's if you have it, let's do some more show and tell.
Okay, yeah, I'll be more than happy to do that. So what I showed you was starting with the dashboard. I showed you that I had created a custom dashboard, and I just put a couple widgets on here. You can easily customize this yourself just by clicking on edit, and I can change the title and I can add different widgets and resources and whatnot here. I just put a clock and a list of my resources. And then when I created this VM1 virtual machine, I pinned it to the dashboard so that it was easy for me to find. But once you've edited that dashboard and you have it the way you want it, you can download it and then put it into a different Azure subscription or share it with other people. Of course, I can delete it, or I can take one that I've created and downloaded previously and upload it. And you can have multiple dashboards. So I've got a demo dashboard that I use called Looper Demo, and it looks very different and has different resources showing and available. So very customizable, the Azure dashboard to how you like it and what you want to pin and that type of thing. But that's just to show you the dashboard. So I showed you that. I showed you a running virtual machine and the process you would go through to create a new virtual machine. But I want to share a couple other great Azure capabilities with you. One is called Security Center. Microsoft has crazy visibility to the vulnerabilities that exist on physical and virtual machines and the kinds of attacks that take place on internet connected properties. So we have created something called the Azure Security Center that once you start deploying resources into Azure, we will scan those resources and say, hey, partner, MSP, and customer, whoever it happens to be, we looked at what you've got running in Azure, and we noticed on compute that we have, in my case, 22 different recommendations of things that you should probably do to your virtual machines that are running in Azure. So if I click on those recommendations, it's going to say, well, there's some monitoring health issues. You're missing the advanced firewall endpoint protection on most of your VMs and so on. So it'll give me suggestions on that. It also looks at non-virtual machine resources like cloud services. I don't have any running in my subscription at the moment. And it can give networking suggestions in addition to compute suggestions. And it even tells us in this particular subscription what's the most attacked resource, because in Azure, just like everywhere else, you probably need edge firewall protection. And I have this virtual machine that's running Linux that, thank goodness, doesn't have a significant vulnerability, but it's been attacked by a known malicious machine, and I can have Azure tell me about that. So Security Center is just a best practice if you're starting to deploy resources into Azure, whether it's virtual machines or others, that you keep an eye on on behalf of your customers. You keep an eye on things like Azure Security Center. And it'll tell me where the information came from, where the attack came from. In this case, it looks like it came from somewhere in Poland, and how Azure said, is this an attack that I'm aware of? So really good information there in Azure Security Center. And then I'm going to move on to something called Azure Advisor. But before I do that, Harry, happy to see if there's another question that would be relevant at the moment.
Yeah, let me. Yeah, let's take Eric's. Let's kind of break it up. So a little while ago, Eric asked if we are a Microsoft Silver partner / Azure partner, do we get offered some internal use Azure instances? So internal use, and I am interested in the answer myself.
Yeah, sure. There are multiple ways that partners can get internal use, what I want to call it. I guess Azure credits is sort of the way to think of it for internal use. And I'm just going to call out two of them. They, of course, depend on you having an MPN, Microsoft Partner Network relationship with Microsoft. And then as a result of that, you get a variety of benefits. And if you're at either the silver level or the gold level in varying competencies, and I'd have to point you to partner.microsoft.com to get the specifics for each competency, you're going to get some thousands of dollars of Azure credit per year for your own internal use for training, education, internal workloads, demos, proofs of concept, that kind of thing. And again, that varies whether you're silver or gold and what competencies you have. And then the other thing I'll call out is, again, as you get benefits by being part of the Microsoft Partner Network, one of the things that you get is what we used to call MSDN. Now the Visual Studio Online subscriptions, you get some number of seats of that. It could be 5 or 20 or more than that, depending on the competency and level that you have. And each of those come with some monthly credit. So if you get 5 of those and it comes with $100 or $200 of monthly Azure credit, that's also available for your testing or development or internal use. So it's possible, if you are gold and get lots of MSDN or Visual Studio Online credits, that you could get thousands of dollars a month of Azure as a benefit of having that competency relationship with Microsoft.
Well, and I might add, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe my information's current, but Steve, and many of the listeners know I did 2 years with the big data predictive analytics startup on downtown Seattle, and we joined BizSpark, the Microsoft startup motion. Jim B over there, and folks, if you want more information, I'll connect you with Jim B. And it was a very generous allocation of Azure credits. And the reason that was important for us is we inherited, with all due respect, but we inherited AWS when we made an acquisition. So our BI engine was out of Madrid, Spain, and so that was part of my job, was to get it all buttoned up for a Microsoft world. And I mean, I won't bore you with the details, but you get the point. BizSpark, and that's still there, right? I mean, I haven't peeked over at BizSpark in a couple months, but I'm assuming that's all still there.
Yeah, BizSpark is still there. I'm not an expert on it, so I'm not going to try to go down the path of telling you exactly what you get for participating in BizSpark, but you're absolutely right. There are some Azure credits that come as part of that relationship as well.
Okay, and then finally on this topic, David Lichtig offers online up here. He goes, the traditional action pack comes with $100 a month credit without silver or gold needed. Okay, thank you, David. Randy, if you want to start teeing up, we'll be hearing from our friends at Intermedia shortly, but we got about 4 or so minutes till 1 o'clock. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, I'll show you one more thing before we give Randy the floor. I showed you the Azure Security Center, which again is something that Azure will do on your behalf as you start deploying things into Azure. Excuse me. We also have something called Azure Advisor, which I guess you'd call it a service, but it's really a feature inside Azure that will do the same kind of thing. It will look across the resources that are in your own Azure subscription or that of your individual customers if you're an MSP, and it'll make recommendations on a variety of fronts, including high availability, security, and performance. And I can't really speak to the cost recommendation and how that's represented through CSP. So I don't want to go too far down that path, because as we talked about, the pricing's sort of different if a customer's buying through you rather than buying directly from Microsoft or on an enterprise agreement or something like that. But I'll highlight two things here. Performance, if there was something wrong with the resources that I had deployed, Azure would suggest some performance recommendations. And then availability, we will click into and take a look. Security, we talked about separately in the Azure Security Center. So here, from a high availability standpoint, Azure looked and said, you know, there are a couple benefits that you would get by enabling, and in this case it says virtual machine backup. And here it talks about availability sets for improved fault tolerance, and it says that there are a couple different virtual machines that are impacted, and I could click through here and see those different recommendations. So that's kind of helpful that Azure will provide those kinds of things to me as a partner or as an end customer. So I'll stop there for the moment, and then I've got a couple more demos I'm happy to show, and certainly happy to answer additional questions after the top of the hour.
Sure. Well, let's do this. And Ken, what I'm thinking is, Jenny and Ken, if you could have a chat up on the control panel. Ken, I'd like to bring you up to presenter level to have you ask your questions live after 1 p.m. if you're agreeable. So maybe if you and Jenny could have a chat, and she'll elevate you up to presenter, because Ken, these questions, it's going to take me too long to read them, and I appreciate it. It's just easier to have, I don't have to be man in the middle. So with that said, we're going to hear from Intermedia, and Jenny's keying up the video. Folks, use your computer speaker. Use your computer speaker to hear the Intermedia story. Then we're going to have a chit chat with Randy. So thank you for taking care of those that take care of us and listening to Intermedia. Jenny, are we ready to roll? Looks like you're teeing it up.
The unified communications market is exploding, and Intermedia Unite gives you the opportunity to tap into this market and win. It's easy to use cloud-based unified communications that helps your customers to be more productive and helps Intermedia partners to be more profitable. Intermedia Unite seamlessly integrates all your customers' communication and collaboration tools into one manageable and customizable solution. It's easy to deploy with pre-programmed plug-and-play business phones. It delivers over 90 advanced calling features with free domestic long distance. The Intermedia Unite desktop app's on-screen indicator lets users know if coworkers' phones are busy before calling. Just click on the contact to start a call. Call Flip moves active calls from one device to another. The Intermedia Unite mobile app enables mobile devices to work like desk phones with time-saving features like voicemail transcription. Powerful video conferencing, screen sharing, and file sharing facilitates better collaboration inside and outside the company. And it's backed by Intermedia's 5 nines uptime service level agreement and 24/7 JD Power certified support. For partners, Intermedia's 360-degree approach to partner success sets you apart. It removes complicated taxation and billing roadblocks and helps make marketing, ordering, and onboarding a breeze. Our administrator portal lets you order hardware or service online. Auto-attended, hunt groups, and call reports are also easily configured from that same portal. Either manage it yourself or enable customer self-service. And clear, flexible quoting tools make it easy to present Intermedia Unite to your customers. Intermedia Unite, partner-friendly business communications, integrated, efficient, and reliable.
Sponsors that support us and make the trains run on time. And with that, we welcome Randy from Intermedia. So Intermedia has jumped on board to play in this SMB Nation reindeer game. Randy, thank you very much.
Thanks, Harry, for having me. I'm very pleased to be here and proud to represent Intermedia on our first Tech Talk. So this will be one of many with you. And yeah, again, very excited to be here. As I'm sure the group saw from the video, you know, we've launched a new platform recently, our Unified Communications platform. It's kind of the as a service space, like we were talking about earlier. You see, you know, Unified Communications as a service, and quite an explosive market these days. So we feel like we're trying to, you know, get our fair share in it, or unfair share, if we're lucky. And so, you know, I think a big part of, you know, the audience today is just we want to stress the flexibility that Intermedia brings to unified communications and productivity, as well as collaboration. You know, without collaboration, productivity these days with such a remote global workforce is kind of difficult. So that's really what we're proud of with the Unite platform. We've got a very robust roadmap that's coming out every day almost. It seems like new features and improvements. Yeah. So moving very quickly here at Intermedia. And, you know, we're also very proud of our partner program and our partner offering being one of the richest, most profitable partner programs out there in the UCaaS space. Highly competitive market, but you know, we've worked really hard to launch and roll out profitable programs for partners in the form of both white label and advisor model, where we take care of all the support and billing and things that, you know, partners may not be able to do themselves with their own resources. So we feel like we can do that heavy lifting for them and really truly be a partner and even help with co-branding and marketing and things like that. Yep. So yeah, again, really happy to be here next week, or the next webinar. I think we're going to have some subject matter experts on the call from Intermedia, so that'll be awesome. But this is just a quick intro to kick us off, and as a sponsor, and again, really happy to be partnering with SMB Nation.
Well, Randy, we already have a question, and folks, while I ask the question and Randy answers it, if you could go ahead and complete the poll that's up on the screen. So we have. Oh, good, Michael Cabral. So welcome back, Michael. Michael asked a question for Intermedia. How about fax services? It's a good question.
Fax services, F-A-X, yes?
Yeah, the old school. Are you supporting that as part of your telephony platform that you're aware of?
We do. We are supporting fax. I would be happy to get more information, put Michael in more contact with our product experts, but on the high level, yes, we do support fax capabilities.
Okay, great. And then Randy, before you go, we always like to kind of keep it personal. So first of all, you're down in the Bay Area, is that correct? You're located down in the Silicon Valley?
That's right. Intermedia is headquartered in Mountain View, down in Silicon Valley. I'm working out of our California office today. We also have an office up in Bellevue, so right near you Harry. And yeah, I manage the partner programs, and so I'm very close to our channel ecosystem and all the moving parts involved with it. And it's a really exciting space to be. I love our partners. I love the partner ecosystem, and Intermedia also loves them. So happy to be here.
Well, and I'll end on this, that you have a couple of well-known figures in the Bellevue office that our audience would know from the go-go days of the Microsoft SMB partner program. Eric Monterano. Did I get that right? I always worry about the way I say his last name. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So friend of the family. Thank you, Randy. Why don't we jump back into the good stuff if you don't mind? And what I want to do, well, first, I guess I'll ask Steve. Steve, what's your pleasure? Did you have one or two more demos you'd like to do, and then we'll wrap it up with you'd like to proceed?
Sure, I'm happy to show kind of one and a half, maybe more things that would be interesting to show. We talked about IaaS, and we talked about PaaS and SaaS, and now we talked about UC as a service. So there's no shortage of, here we go, Harry. There's no shortage of those ASs. What I encourage MSPs to think about, certainly as you move into making Azure part of your portfolio, and this kind of came up with the answer I gave Ken early on, is really about what offers do you want to take to market and to your customers, and how do you want to differentiate yourself. And I know we heard from some solutions from EFolder, and I don't want to show a competitive offering. I just want to mention that Microsoft has a number of first-party solutions that are great ways to get started in some of these. And I love that there are partners who are doing, whether it's backup or business continuity or disaster recovery as a service or UC as a service. There are partners who are very, very focused on the kinds of offerings that they have that frequently can help you provide more value, let's say, to customers than what you might get out of a first-party offer. But the things I wanted to just kind of show here in the Azure portal are two Azure services, one called Azure Backup, and it's a pretty basic backup as a service. There's, oops, I clicked on the wrong thing. There's a construct called a Recovery Services Vault. This is really just the place where you put data for a business continuity or a disaster recovery or a backup type solution that you offer to your customer. You're going to create inside their Azure subscription, you're going to create one or more recovery services vaults. And I created this brand new, so there's nothing in it. And then once you have that vault, you can start creating solutions for that customer or your customers across the board, including backup. And I just want to show you a quick look at the interface. You can say, I'm going to back something up that's running in Azure. We like that. That makes us very happy. Or you can say, I want to back something up that's running on premises, or gosh, for that matter, it could be in a different cloud provider. We don't actually check. We don't say you have to show us the lights on the hardware. Just on premises to us really means not running in Azure. And then you get to choose what I want to back up, a Hyper-V virtual machine, a VMware virtual machine, or any number of other things like bare metal. That's what you might say I want to do if I'm running a VM in a different cloud provider. You could pick a bare metal recovery. So you decide what you want to back up, everywhere from just files and folders to any number of virtualized or physical machines. And again, not going to walk through the wizard today in the interest of time, but you can do that and offer that as a service that allows the backups to take place of resources wherever they happen to live, whether it's files, folders, SQL Server, Exchange Server, physical or virtual machines, and then back that up into Azure. And then we also offer a disaster recovery product that you can sell to your customers called Azure Site Recovery. And again, I'm not going to go completely through the wizard, but there is a wizard that takes you through the process where you say, here's what I want to accomplish on behalf of my customers. I want to set a protection goal, and I want to protect virtual machines either that exist in Azure or that exist elsewhere today, like on-prem, and we want to protect them into Azure, or you could protect them to a different location, like a different cloud provider or a hosted data center or whatnot, and then you can pick if they're virtualized. Are they virtualized with Hyper-V, VMware, or maybe they're not virtualized? And then Azure Site Recovery will essentially take a snapshot, create a complete clone, if you will, of that virtual machine, both the data and the configuration, to as closely as we can match it in Azure, and put that into an Azure virtual machine that's not running. So then you pay per month for protected machines that sit in Azure, so that if a physical or virtual machine that's running a production workload goes away, you can come in here to the Azure portal and click failover, and then that will be, and then of course you have to repoint the clients or point DNS or whatever it happens to be that you need to do to have that workload running in Azure. My last point about this, and then Harry, happy to discuss some questions, is that when this first came out, it was intended to be used for disaster recovery and protecting physical and virtual machines. And a lot of customers and partners said, hey, this is kind of a cool way to migrate physical and virtual machines into Azure. and they would fail over into Azure and then never fail back, because now you've got your virtual machines running in Azure. And as I said before, when you protect a machine, you pay per month to protect that machine. But then when it's running, you pay for the actual compute and storage and network. So if it's not running, you're basically paying to protect it. And when it's running, you of course pay for the regular Azure utilization charges. So really, I think that's all the demo I have. I have one more kind of uber geek thing that I might show before the end of the call if we run out of questions. But other than that, Harry, I'm more than happy to take some questions.
Okay, so Ken, come off mute. Again, for those of you that joined late, Ken Schaefer out of Portland, Oregon, runs a partner group called the Technology Wizards. And Ken, I want to take your last question first about hands-on lab training with realistic small business outcomes. And like I say, I could read what you wrote, but you, sir, you can say it better than I. How you doing, Ken?
I'm doing well down here in Salem. Thanks, and it's good to be a part of this. So yeah, as Harry was alluding to, small business partners, one of the biggest impediments that we've had, Steve, is the lack of real technical training for adopting and deploying and managing and configuring Azure and even the Office 365 solution stack, etc. We used to get that training from TechNet staff members. It was fantastic, but that has long been gone, as you well know. And so, it's something I've been asking for years, talked to different people throughout Microsoft. How can we get the real helpful technical training that allows us to learn what we need to do for deploying and maintaining Azure, intended for small business outcomes, not enterprise level outcomes, without incurring significant costs in the process?
Yeah, I like the question very much. I'm just jotting down, I think I have like 4 answers for you. And I want to make what I think is a reasonable distinction, and you're all welcome to disagree with me if it's not. When you talk about relevant to small business, my position on that would be, for the most part, the technology is the technology. And if you're using Office 365 or Azure or anything else, the technology is basically the technology. It's just a difference of scale. Now, where I would say there's a significant difference is in the solutions that you offer to your customers and, of course, your approach and relationship and that kind of thing. But when it comes to virtual machines, when it comes to storage, when it comes to backing up and first or third-party disaster recovery solutions, those are applicable, whether you're talking to a small business or a large enterprise. But that wasn't your question. Your question was, I think, about technical readiness, and I have 4 answers for you. The first is that there are an insane number of, I'm going to be very clear, not free, really good readiness opportunities. And I'll give you a couple examples. I'm not endorsing anybody. I just want you to get the concept of the different things that are available. Something like an edX or Opsagility or Pluralsight. Those are just a few examples that come to mind. There are a number of others, but they all offer self-paced online training, lots of different Azure topics, including running Windows on Azure, running Linux on Azure, so on and so forth. And many of those include hands-on opportunities as well. And as I said before, not a plug for anybody, but those are typically not free offerings. Those are companies like you who are in business to sell, in their case, training. There are some free hands-on opportunities. If you go to Microsoft.com/hands-on-labs, there are some self-paced hands-on labs and a good number of Azure-related topics. I want to say there's 200 or 300 total labs out there, and therefore there's probably some dozens of Azure networking and Azure backup and Azure web apps and so on that are available at Microsoft.com/hands-on-labs. So those are sort of the online, at your own pace kinds of things. Things like the online training sites, as well as some stuff that we offer to customers and to partners. And then you mentioned the TechNet team, and I don't know exactly who you had in mind when you mentioned that team, but I do want to offer that we have 2 things that we make available one in various cities around the country. We do a partner practice enablement, or Azure boot camp, we call it, which is depending on what city you end up in, a 2 or 3 day readiness thing that involves hands-on. And I happen to know that there will be one. I know you said you're in Salem, but there will be one in Portland at the end of June. The registration is not yet open, but I'm happy to make sure that you get invited. But my colleagues are doing these events pretty much on a weekly basis in New York and Dallas and Chicago and Irvine, California, and so on. I happen to know that there's one going to be in Portland at the end of June because I'm delivering it, and we haven't opened registration yet, and that's free to partners. And then the last, I think I said there were 4. The last thing I'll mention to you is that on a probably quarterly basis, we offer a really deep, immersive, what we call an architectural boot camp. So this presumes some hands-on working, probably 200 to 300 level knowledge of Azure already. It's not intended to teach that. It's intended to teach people how to design solutions for your customers. And this is a 5 long days, and it's always held in the Seattle area because we bring in a bunch of people from product management and engineering, and it'd be really difficult to get them to travel. So we do that, and that is not free. There is a cost, of course, both for registration as well as your travel and lost billable time. So we recognize that. We had one just in April, and there were probably 400 or 500 partners from around the world, big partners, small partners, whatever, who attended that. I said there were going to be 4. I'm going to give you one bonus because that's the kind of guy I am. Is Ignite is coming up in, I think, September, and there's no shortage of learning and readiness opportunities if you go to a conference like Build or like Ignite, where you can sit in sessions and have hands-on opportunities. So Harry, I know that was a really long answer, but there you go.
No, that's fine. And Ken, stay on the line. I'm going to circle back to you with some of your other comments, but let me knock out, I promised Jerry. I don't know if, Steve, you can answer this. I see Randy from Intermedia may be with us, and maybe she can answer it. The question is it true Microsoft will be charging $15,000 per year to remain a CSP? So Randy or Steve, don't know if you're qualified or know about this. This is our friend Jerry asking the question.
There have been, I don't want Randy to have to be on the hook for that. There have been some announcements about updates to the CSP program. I am not familiar with the specifics either about when they're taking place, about the requirement changes or costs or anything like that. Anything like what Jerry's describing to me sounds like it's liable to be a direct CSP kind of thing, because we don't have a relationship with the indirect. They have that relationship. The indirect resellers have that relationship with the indirect provider. But you could certainly go look at partner.microsoft.com to see if there have been, or keep an eye there for announcements. If we do solidify any updated requirements or anything like that, that's the kind of thing that we would talk about at our Inspire conference. It used to be the Worldwide Partner Conference, coming up in Las Vegas in July.
Yep. Next question, Just Van Houten. He is asking, how do we sign up for such a training? So I think that refers to the training like you'll be doing in Portland. Is there a stand-up a page that's, a static page they can go to today, understanding you haven't opened Portland yet?
Portland is not open yet. I asked this morning and they told me that it should be open next week. The best place to look for ongoing availability of those kinds of readiness is, and I don't have the page in front of me, but if you just search for Partner Hot Sheet, every month there's a blog post that goes up that talks about the different trainings that are available. And I believe that these kind of in-person trainings, do show up on there. If you have a relationship with a partner development manager, partner technology strategist, whether it's somebody who comes and visits you or somebody you talk to on the phone, I would reach out to them and see if they get knowledge of that. And lastly, there is a partner community that is a Yammer network, and I'm fairly certain that the announcements for those trainings get posted by a gentleman named Jeff Wagner, who coordinates these all around the country. So those would be the places I would take a look. And I'm more than happy to share some of those links with Jenny and Harry if you need them either posted to their website or if they want to go out in a recap email.
All right, and the gentleman's name is Yost. He's given me a hard time up here in the Q&A format for mispronouncing his name. David Ham, I'll get to your question next, but Ken, let's bring you back on live and back up to the first part of the webinar where you have a legitimate conversation about the evolution of the partner journey versus taking care of the customer first, and I'm not doing a good job of framing it up, but go ahead. What say you, sir? It's a good conversation.
Well, okay. I just was trying to address the fact that we hear comments from Steve and others talking about using the term evolution, and it really isn't an evolution process. We're in the business of delivering what our clients and customers want rather than what our vendor partners want us to deliver. And I sadly often hear the term evolution used in kind of an insulting fashion. Sadly, it implies that people who prefer their data within their four walls are wrong to prefer that.
Yeah, and I think, Steve, not sure you have the answer, but feedback is the breakfast of champions.
Right. And point being, I just had this conversation with a potential new customer 2 days ago. So it's a fresh conversation.
So it's sort of a loaded comment, huh? I welcome every possible perspective, and if you have a business model that works for you and you have adequate demand for that, I would encourage you to do that as long as you can possibly do it. And don't change because we say you should change. But if you look out at all the industry analysts, and if you look out at all the cloud providers, whether it's us or Google or AWS, and gosh, there have been people who have come and gone and kind of pretended to be in the cloud business. It's a thing. The cloud is real, and if there are customers who aren't interested or excited about it and prefer to have their data in their four walls and are comfortable with that, as long as there are people making servers and making installable software and wonderful partners to help them run it, by all means, I would keep doing that. But if you look back 5 years, if you look back 10 years, do you feel like your business is the same as it was 5 or 10 years ago? If you look back 15 years, would we have thought that, or 15 or 20 years, would we have thought that virtualization was as big a deal as it is? So when I say evolution, I'm not talking about Microsoft telling you to do something and you're wrong if you don't. I'm saying these are the trends that we see happening that we're trying to keep up with. Digital transformation is a big deal to a lot of companies. If you've got a customer base that can keep you in business who wants to do things a particular way, whatever it is, whether it's using our cloud or not, whether it's using our technology or not, by all means, please keep doing that. It is not our intent to insult you or your business model. We are trying both to follow and set the technology trends that are going on these days.
All righty, so we have time for one more question from David Ham, and again, it may be just outside your wheelhouse, Steve, but let's give it a shot. David, out of the Silicon Valley himself, is asking, how about an update on Action Pack, continued availability, cost, discount codes, and Azure monthly credits? And I understand that may not be your forte. And in fact, I could turn that into a blog because I'm getting that question a lot. Steve, you have any insights into Action Pack?
I'm looking forward to reading your blog.
There we go. So, folks, Steve has a hard stop at 1:30 Pacific, and I want to go ahead and make sure we honor that. Up, we have a late breaking comment here. David Anderson out of San Diego. Thank you, David. He's saying www.microsoftevents.com for events in the various Microsoft Technology Centers, or MTCs. So thank you, David. And those places are wonderful. They're a little more oriented. Folks, I'm going to wrap it up with and Steve, thank you, sir. I'm going to wrap it up with a shout out to SolarWinds, another community sponsor for SMB Nation. So you'll get some information in the thank you notification from Jenny tomorrow, and it concerns SolarWinds has a email protection package called Mail Assure, so we're helping them get that message out to the SMB Nation community. There'll be an opportunity for you to sign up. A little housekeeping before we hit the button would be that happy GDPR on Friday. So as we're on the webinar, Steve, I got yet another privacy policy update email from a vendor in our space. So it's like everybody's updating their privacy policy like 48 hours out. What do you know? And then, folks, have a great Memorial Day. And like I say, I am confirmed for the CompTIA ChannelCon event in late July, early August in Washington, D.C. I suspect I'll find myself in Las Vegas for Inspire. I will not be there as a member of the press. This is the first year that Microsoft is not inviting members of the press to attend with our press hat on. So I'm gonna sort all that out, but I have a feeling I will be there as a part-time attendee. Steve, thank you very much. Folks, thank you. Ken, thank you for asking great questions. Jenny over in the radio control room, and you'll be getting some resources and a thank you notification tomorrow from Jenny. Everybody have a great day.